The time for silence is over.
But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
I came here to speak on behalf of Donald Trump.
Do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. You want to call them, what do you want to call them? Very fine people on both sides.
And for the white Christian people of this nation.
Oh, give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Who would
white
you like me to condemn?
white supremacists and white
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
In fourth degree, you get arrested or in a serious violent fight for the cause.
Really?
Yes. I'm taking the low road. I'm punching them in the face.
So that
I attacked a couple guys. Very fine people on both sides.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
So I punched him in the face and I ripped his mask off. And then I punched him again.
President Trump retweeted a video showing a supporter making a racist statement.
White power! White power!
Very fine people on both sides.
Did Hitler do anything wrong? No!
Fuck no.
First preset of the truth of right. Remember it. Gas the kites right
Let's have trial by combat.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists, white
Proud
militia?
Boys, stand back and stand by. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honorable tradition. Hello, my name is Chris. Today is January the 17th, 2021. Welcome to The Left Speaks, where we try to have the conversation with conservatives. The phone lines are open and toll-free, and we don't duck any information whatsoever. We have a few pieces of media that have been sent to us by some conservative viewers that we will be happy to go over today. We've broken them into pieces so that we can dissect what's being said and what's not being said, whether things are being represented honestly or dishonestly. And we've also got the original interviews to counter the narrative that is being spread by that. Unfortunately, 11 days later, we are still dealing with conservative excuses attempting to justify the riot and looting of the United States Capitol. It's hard to believe. I know this. And last week, before a lot of these started getting legs under them, before a lot of these excuses started actually being spread among everybody, when they were still being tried out to see what would fit and what would not, and what the people who do not pay as much attention to politics would actually buy, we managed to predict a lot of the paths these were going to take. They're just as ridiculous now as they were then. There is still no excuse for attempting to incite insurrection and to overthrow a constitutionally mandated election that did not go your way. I can't believe I'm having to say that, but that's where we are. do not lose track of what you are trying to excuse. Do not lose track of what you are trying to justify. Do not lose track of what you are trying to equate as okay because, in your eyes, the left did something you disagree with. You are trying to excuse, you are trying to justify, or you are trying to make acceptable the storming, looting, and attempted delay of a constitutionally mandated election inside the United States Capitol building. We're not talking about one protest that got out of hand here. We're not talking about one protest where a few hundred or a few thousand people committed arson. We were talking about a protest that got so out of hand that a few hundred or a few thousand people decided to storm and loot the United States Capitol building, and then, can't believe there's an and then this was in order to overturn an election that didn't go the way these people wanted. That's what makes this insurrection, as opposed to some BLM or Antifa guys who got out of control and burned and looted a gas station. One messes with the Constitution. The other does not. We're going to make this very simple. One messes with a constitutionally required, constitutionally mandated election process. The other does not. These two things are not the same. That doesn't make either one of them right. That doesn't make either one of them justifiable. But hopefully, even for the people who disagree with me, you can understand why I view the first one, trying to overthrow the Constitution, a lot more strongly than I view the second one, trying to burn down a gas station or loot a Target store. Again, I'm not, nor have I ever said, that trying to burn down a gas station or loot a Target store is acceptable behavior. Arrest the people who burned and looted. Try them for their crimes. Convict them of their crimes. Make them serve their sentence. Arrest the people that tried to overthrow the Constitution. Arrest the people that tried to interfere with a constitutionally mandated process to confirm the election results, the basis of American democracy. Investigate them, try them, and let them serve their sentence. That doesn't change the fact that one crime is a whole hell of a lot higher on the scale of national significance than the other crime. I've been asked this past week, why didn't I cover every single rioter and looter from BLM who got arrested? Whereas I have been posting updates as I've seen them on the people who stormed the Capitol when they got arrested. I can't believe I have to say this, but if a gas station in Portland, Oregon is burned down it sucks and they should be tried and it's illegal and they should go to jail. But I don't live in Portland, Oregon. That's local news. I also don't live in Seattle, Washington. I don't live in somewhere in Texas where this happened. I do, however, live in the United States of America. And when someone, or a group of someone's, tries to overthrow the Constitution, that does affect me. That's national. Local. National. This should not be that hard to understand. I can't believe we're still even having this discussion. I honestly don't understand why the conservatives, who were screaming about Antifa riots and BLM looting and nobody should be able to protest for BLM because some of their protests turned into violence. 97% peaceful on BLM, by the way. Less damage from the rioting and the looting that did occur, the 3% of protests that turned violent. Less damage was done across the entire country than Walmart loses to shoplifting every year. But if you really believe that this is some huge problem that would cause anybody associated with BLM, anybody, to lose their constitutionally guaranteed right to protest, to lose their First Amendment right to peacefully assemble, if you believe that because 3% of protests went violent, why aren't you welcoming Democrats and the progressive left on board and holding these same people, the violent protesters who turned to rioting and looting in the U.S. Capitol, and the people who incited them, to the standards you wanted previously? This is why those of us on the progressive end of things, those of us on the Democratic end of things, not because we're solid Democrats, go team, think that you just view this as a team sport. Because if you were consistent, if you were consistent in your own logic and consistent in your own position, then this should be a slam dunk. The same as I did with Trump in relation to his $2,000 checks. Hey, you're late to the party, but better late than never. Welcome on board. Let's convict everybody who looted the Capitol. Let's convict everybody who committed any kind of crimes. And let's convict all of those who encouraged them to do it. This isn't hard. My position, however, is consistent. Convict all the ones who went into violence. Convict all the ones who incited that violence and caused that violence. But the organization as a whole, whether it is BLM or whether it is the Republican Party, still gets to hold their rallies. I'm not over here saying no Republican rallies ever again because there was violence at one. Just like I didn't do that for BLM. Even though the Republicans who were at that rally committed a much more serious crime, a national, federal level crime that attacks the basis of our democracy, that attacks the Constitution of the United States in an attempt to overturn that democracy. Never mind the fact that only 10 House Republicans had the courage to vote for impeachment, to hold the person who incited all of this responsible for their actions. 10. The rest of them, the 150-ish rest of the House Republicans, are either covering for this or justifying it or saying it's too late and there's no point in holding somebody accountable for their actions, or that the election was still a fraud. Still going with this theory. But we can ignore all of that. We conservatives, we Republicans who think that an entire organization should be held accountable for the actions of a small minority of that group. We Republicans, we conservatives who think that nobody in BLM should be able to protest or rally because 3% of their protest descended into chaos and violence. Don't apply that rule to us, because then you're not being fair. Don't hold us accountable. Don't hold us accountable even when we excuse the actions of the violent individuals on our side. Don't hold us accountable even when we tell those violent organizations on our side, like the Proud Boys, to stand back and stand by. Don't hold us accountable when we call people at a neo-Nazi white supremacist rally where a woman was murdered and 19 people were injured because a former neo-Nazi drove his car into a crowd with the intent of hurting and killing as many counter-protesters as he could. Don't hold us accountable. Don't hold our organization accountable. Even when we can't condemn it. Even when we call those supporters very fine people. Even when we can't consistently denounce it. This is not hard, people. There was a man who told everybody that the election was a fraud. Failed to prove his case in court over 60 plus times. Multiple courts. Courts with judges who were appointed by Democrats. Courts with judges that were appointed by Republicans. Courts that were appointed by Donald Trump himself, the man claiming the fraud. He had his days in court and failed. And nobody on the progressive left was saying he didn't get to take anything to court. All we've ever said is, where's the evidence of this supposed fraud? Because if you can't prove your case, you're just spreading lies and myths and fantasies and undermining our democracy. And then, after spreading all those lies and never backing off of them, he told all of his supporters, show up on the day that these election results are going to be confirmed in Congress. All of you guys who want to protest this, don't show up the day before. Don't show up the day after. Show up on the day that the constitutionally required process to confirm the election that we lost is going to happen. And then goes up on stage after a speaker who was advocating for trial by combat because democracy didn't go their way. So maybe we should just go back to fighting this out. Goes up on the same stage as that man. The same podium, the same microphone, and says, hey guys, let's all march down to the Capitol and tell them exactly what we think. Peacefully, well, maybe not so peacefully. And I'll be right there with you. And then when the chaos starts and these protesters break into the Capitol and start looting the place, instead of telling his supporters to go home immediately being the key word there, and before somebody jumps out and says, hey, he said it 2-3 hours later, instead of doing that, he's calling House representatives and senators, according to reports. I obviously don't have the man's phone records. Trying to get them to support his cause in not confirming the election results. Don't forget that's what this was about. That he wanted the Vice President, Mike Pence, to deny the results from states that he thought committed fraud. Again, failed in court every single time to come anywhere close to proving this. But he wanted the Vice President to overturn the election. And he wanted senators and congressmen to back him on this without a shred of evidence that would stand up in court. And then, when things are finally getting under control, hey guys, all you people in the Capitol, this isn't the way to do it. I know you're upset, but go home peacefully. We love you. And now I have to sit here and listen to the idea that a man can start the lies, set the date, tell everybody to march down to the Capitol, not do anything to prevent the violence once it starts, and tell everybody who went to the Capitol that he loves them, but that he bears no responsibility in what happened. That he should be immune from any consequences because how could you see this coming? This is ridiculous. So let's try a little simple analogy here. Let's pretend, instead of telling his supporters to march on the Capitol and challenge congressmen to overturn an election, that he had gone in front of a crowd and didn't say that there was election fraud, but that Jewish people were secretly running the government. And all these people that agreed with him about these Jewish people secretly running the government, hey, y'all should all meet me in Washington, D.C. on January the 6th, when the synagogue is holding a big service. And let's pretend for a minute that instead of following a speaker on that podium and that microphone that had advocated to go down to the Capitol and challenge congressmen and senators to trial by combat, instead we had been talking about rabbis. We should go down to that synagogue and challenge these rabbis spreading these lies to trial by combat. And then President Trump walks up behind the microphone after setting all this in place and following that speech and says, hey, let's all march down to that synagogue, tell those rabbis exactly what we think, and I'll be right there with you. Do you see it now? And then once the place is being looted and people have broken in, we're not going to send the police. We're not going to send the guard. Instead, we're going to call the rabbis and tell them, hey, you should support me politically. You should quit doing that thing you're doing where you're opposing me. I'm not going to send any help. Whatever happens, happens. Do we hold him accountable in that scenario? Show me how it's different. All I changed was the building, and instead of congressmen, it was rabbis and Jewish people. You may not like politicians. You may really hate Democratic politicians. That's fine. You can have your disagreements. But this is unacceptable. And if you can't even hold the man that called for insurrection and set the date and wouldn't send help to quell it, to stop it, accountable, you ever expect me to negotiate or compromise with you again, you've got another thing coming. I will not negotiate about democracy. Democracy is non-negotiable. And if this is what you're supporting, if this is what you're excusing, if even this isn't enough, I will never consider voting for you. I will never consider compromising with you. You have removed yourself from any rational, reasonable, peaceful conversation. Clean up your house. I would much rather go back to debating about tax rates and whether the wealthy get to pay 1%, 5%, 20%, or 78%. Than I would talking about whether or not this was insurrection. And I'll clue you in on a little hint. The entire Joint Chiefs of Staff have released a statement where they agree that this was insurrection. If you want to go argue with them, the generals in charge of the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, if you want to go argue with all of them about what is and what is not sedition and insurrection, feel free. But I'm not interested in arguing with you anymore about it. From Barbara, what are my thoughts on Hawley and Cruz? I think they're political opportunists. I think it was Paul Ryan, might have been Rand Paul, don't hold me to it. I saw it briefly, that came out and basically said if the party disavows a lot of these Trump supporters, they're going to lose 30 to 35% of their base, which will obviously, with the elections being as close across the country as they are, cost them power and cost them elections. And I think what you're watching between Hawley and Cruz right now is purely self-serving. I'm going to put myself in front of the country. And even Hawley and Cruz wouldn't get up there and flat say, oh yeah, we've got proof of election fraud. If you listen to them, all they would say over and over again is my constituents have questions. And instead of leading and telling them, hey, there's nothing to this, it's been shot down in court like 63, 65 times, they're sitting there trying to say, oh, we should look at it, we should consider it, we should, voice their concerns, because they want that vote in 2024. They want to be able to come out and say, hey, we were on the side of President Trump, we backed him. All you people who are diehard Trump supporters, we're your guy. And that's all that's going on. Personally, I think they should be kicked out of the Senate. I think we should invoke Article 14, Section 3, which says when you basically go against the Constitution and you're not honoring your oath, you can be booted out. I think we should send them back to their respective states, Texas and Missouri. Both parties should do this and say, sorry, Texas and Missouri, you need to try again. Do I think that will happen? No, I do not. I don't think there's enough Republicans willing to put their necks on the line for the country as a whole to benefit. I think they're more worried about whether they get to keep their seat than anything else. And you're seeing this in the justifications. Like I said, when they're talking about whether or not, when they're talking about how much support they would lose if they came out against this, instead of whether or not there's actual evidence and actual proof here, that's exactly what you're dealing with. So that's my short version on Hawley and Cruz. I think they're willing to let the republic be damaged and democracy be damaged to benefit themselves. And I think they're playing an extremely dangerous game. Not for them personally, but for democracy and for the country as a whole. We saw the same thing back in the 1930s in Germany, when you had a bunch of rich, powerful, wealthy elite who thought that they could use Hitler and his party to gain power and get what they wanted. They thought he was manageable. And I think you've seen the same thing pretty much with Trump all the way along. Hell, you're seeing the same thing now with McConnell not willing to bring the Senate back in session to hold him accountable. Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is just going to leave the Senate on vacation until the 19th, which basically means nothing will happen in terms of convicting Trump on his impeachment until we have a Democratic majority in the Senate. That switches on the 20th. That, unfortunately, is not shocking. Republican Senate has basically accomplished nothing through the Trump term, except appointing some Supreme Court judges and some tax cuts for the super, super rich. Everything else has basically been deadlocked. So at least he's consistent. We're not going to do anything, just like we didn't do anything about Obamacare, just like we didn't do anything about anything else we promised, getting a wall passed or anything else, $2,000 checks, $600 checks. We're just going to do nothing. The Republican Party, we say government doesn't work, and if you elect us to office, we're going to prove it. Because we're just not going to show up to even do our jobs. Agree or disagree with the House vote? At least they had one. Republicans can't even manage that much when they run the Senate. Now, we're going to go through a few things that have been sent to me by a conservative viewer who's still on the Trump side of things. One of them hasn't come to full fruition yet. Basically, Trump said, I believe it was on Thursday, that he was going to release a stack of documents about Obama having the FBI monitor his campaign for Russian interference. Fox News is trying to label this Obamagate. Can I mention off the side that I hate the fact that everything is a gate now? Watergate was an actual, place and building. Obamagate is nonsense, but that's a personal thing. But anyway, we're going to check out some videos real quick from Lou Dobbs over at Fox News. Again, I clipped it to show the difference and the dishonesty here. And then the new thing that we're going to dive into, and hopefully this person calls in. They said they were going to try to, but they may be busy. It's going around that this was a Antifa operation. The storming of the Capitol was secretly a bunch of leftist anarchists pretending to be Trump supporters and make Trump look bad. But first, we'll deal with the Lou Dobbs bit. Okay, so this is how it starts out.
Breaking news now. And just the news editor-in-chief John Solomon reporting President Trump has declassified major Obamagate documents. The president's sweeping order includes everything from dossier author, former MI6 agent Christopher Steele, and debriefing reports from Stephen Hopper's role as FBI spy. The documents are expected to be released to the public as early as tomorrow or perhaps Monday. Joining us now is John Solomon, and he is also a great American and best-selling author. Good to have you with us, John. I want to turn to what we just reported here about 10 minutes ago, and that is that there is evidence that a left-wing activist was, in point of fact, an agitator in that mob that assailed the Capitol. I understand that you have reporting on this as well. Tell us what you will, please.
Yes, there is a new FBI affidavit filed in court today in which an FBI agent says John Sullivan of Utah, a liberal anarchist, liberal activist, was participating in the rally. He has been out there saying, listen, I was filming it as a journalist. I was there inside the Capitol as a journalist. The FBI says that is not true. He was participating in the acts, according to the FBI. He was encouraging people to light things on fire. He was encouraging people to take things, and the FBI recommends in their affidavit that he be charged with federal crimes. This is the first known person that the FBI has confirmed, a liberal activist, not a Trump activist, a liberal activist engaged in criminality inside the Capitol as part of last Wednesday's riots.
Okay, so notice there's a bunch of documents that are going to be released, according to Trump. Maybe as soon as tomorrow. Again, remember this took place on Thursday, or at least it was sent to me on Thursday. But maybe as late as Monday. As of right now, I have not been able to find anything. There's no updates that I've been able to find from Lou Dobbs's network. There's no documents that have been dropped and released and analyzed yet. So we're stuck with nothing. The rest of that about the left-wing anarchist we'll dive into in the next segment, because there's another gentleman who goes a lot more in depth into the left-wing anarchist in the Capitol. But everything Lou Dobbs said about this is going to prove this and this is going to provide that, the documents haven't been released yet. It's pure speculation. It's pure conjecture. The man hasn't seen the stuff. Now, the gentleman he's talking to goes on to admit that.
Let's turn to the issue at hand, and that is the most important matter, I think, here tonight, and that is the president declassifying these documents on Obamagate. The spying conspiracy and plot and the actual effort to overthrow this president as a result. We now know that there are documents that exist that support the president and make liars out of so many who claimed that there was no spying, there was no effort to do exactly what they did.
You are 100% right. I can confirm. We were talking last night. Will the president deliver on this? One of the last remaining promises. He has delivered in a big way. More than a foot-high stack of documents he has authorized, released by the FBI and the Justice Department. These are the things that the FBI has tried to keep from the public for 4 years. They have amazing big picture revelations. And let's start with, I think, the most important one. Christopher Steele, in his debriefings with the FBI after he was fired for leaking, he told the FBI, the reason I leaked is because I needed to help Hillary Clinton cover up her email problem. So I leaked to turn the attention to Donald Trump. The Russia collusion narrative was invented to protect Hillary Clinton from ongoing revelations about her email scandal. It was a political dirty trick, and that was Christopher Steele's own words. People tomorrow, I believe, will get to see his words. I've been reporting on this privately. I haven't seen the declassified documents yet, but
I haven't seen the declassified documents yet. People tomorrow will be reporting on this. But you can believe me, it's going to say all this other bullshit I just rambled off. I haven't seen it. I don't know. I haven't been able to read it. It won't be out till tomorrow. Apparently, it's not even out tomorrow because that was Friday. But believe you me, it's going to show that the Democrats did this illegal stuff and they illegally spied on Trump's campaign and all this. And it's going to exonerate Trump. And I believe all of this without seeing it. Barbara, I'll address your question here in just a minute. This is not reality. You are way ahead of the evidence. You are supposed to follow evidence to a conclusion, not have a conclusion and then just say the evidence is going to support you before you even see it. Watergate didn't become Watergate until it had evidence. They didn't pick the name of a random place and then decide to pin a bunch of stuff on Nixon without bothering to see the evidence, which is what these two guys are doing. Two guys who are on a news show, a show that represents itself as news. This is all opinion, conjecture, and wishful thinking. Even if it comes out that there was some stuff that was done illegally, they can't know that when they said this. They're premature.
I'm telling you that my reporting, I know that's in the document. Similarly, Stefan Halper, the other informant, remember he's the guy that recorded Papadopoulos and Carter Page.
Right.
In his tasking orders, when the FBI is tasking him, my sources tell me from weeks and months of reporting on this, that he was told to spy on the Trump campaign. In fact, he was given a cover. Try to pretend you might want to get involved and get hired by the Trump campaign, and then start talking to people and pump them from information. In anyone's book, that is spying. Remember, James Comey said it wasn't spying. The Democrats called it wasn't spying. This document, when it's released tomorrow or Monday, will blow out of the water any idea other than the FBI was spying on the Trump campaign.
This document, when it is released tomorrow, so again, guy hasn't seen it, but he's already drawn the conclusion about what it's going to say. And if it doesn't, you'll never hear from him again. If it does, oh, hey guys, look, I got it right. And to me, that sounds like an undercover investigation. He even said he had cover as a Trump supporter, pretending to try to get a job. Well, if you've got a valid report to go investigate an organization, seems like a normal thing the FBI would do is send in an undercover agent to see if there's more to the report, to see if the report is valid. And then Lou Dobbs's conclusion, again, without seeing any of this actual information, any of these actual documents, any of this stuff that's supposed to be released, but has not as of now.
Absolutely. And history, as the radical Dems wanted it to be written, even by their fellow travelers, it has just exploded. The truth is about to be presented to the American people, and when it is,
that is true.
There will be quite a different view of a number of actors who worked against the interest of the nation and this president for over 4 years.
He knows all of this somehow without seeing one single sheet of paper and all of this information that's coming, but he knows it's going to support him. This is not reporting. This is propaganda. These are lies. And like I said, if he's right, he'll parade it around. See, I got it. But you can't know that he's right now. And if he's wrong, you'll never hear about it again. This is nonsense. This is making up your mind to support your team before you ever look at the evidence. And this is where me and my Trump supporter viewers constantly differ. I want to see the proof before I make up my mind. I might say, hey, that sounds fishy. Or, hey, maybe we should look into that more. Or, I don't know what I think about that. Let me find out. Or, hey, what you're saying doesn't make any sense to me. That's not what Fox News just did. Fox News just got on the screen and said this is going to rewrite history and show how the Democrats are evil. All without seeing a single shred of evidence. This is an example of what having a narrative is that you're trying to push, about deciding what you want the story to be before you ever see any of the evidence, before you ever see any of the proof. This is creating a story out of whole cloth. This is writing a myth and then hoping that it comes out your way. This is dishonesty, and this should be covered by the fairness doctrine, which we need to desperately reinstate so we can get that regulated. If you can't prove it as true, which there's no way in hell you could prove it as true since none of the documents have been released, then you shouldn't be able to represent yourself as news, because you're not. Barbara, I live in Pennsylvania. Doug Mastriano, Republican, Pennsylvania, was present at the rally on January the 6th. Do you feel that he should face repercussions? I do not believe he entered the Capitol, but was there in his army fatigues, posting to his social media accounts, and I believe that the posts have since been deleted. I personally feel that he should no longer be allowed to represent my state. I do not live in the state of Pennsylvania. I think I've read a brief story on Doug Mastriano. I do not recall all the facts of his participation. So I'm going to have to engage in a certain amount of hypotheticals and what ifs here. Okay. If he did not enter the Capitol, while I might disagree with his views, just being at the DC protest for me is nowhere near enough to kick him out of the House or the Senate. I don't recall which one he's in, to be honest with you. If he incited violence, however, if he cheered on the people going into the Capitol and encouraged them, and we have proof of that, if we can go back in the internet and find out where he was posting all this stuff and encouraging it, then we're starting to cross into different territory for me. If his advocacy, Senate, thank you, Barbara. If his advocacy of Trump's lies crossed the line from, hey, we should investigate this, into, hey, this factually happened, even though we can't prove it, then yes, I think he should fall under the same articles that I think Cruz and Hawley should fall under. If he's pretending, the same as Cruz and Hawley are, that, hey, election fraud is a real thing because my constituents have concerns, then yes. But going to the protest in D.C. is not the same as inciting the riot and looting of the U.S. Capitol, and it is not the same as actually being involved in the rioting and looting of the U.S. Capitol. There are, 70 plus million people who voted for Trump? Plenty of them are uninformed. Plenty of them voted for him just because they thought it would help them get their way and achieve their policies that they want to see done as conservatives. I may think they're vastly misled on that, but here, Bill Maher and I agree. Don't let a few thousand violent individuals have you want to write off a solid third to a half of the country. Now, like I said, if he got up there and he advocated for violence, if he propagated these lies, if he encouraged these people to go into the Senate and the House, into the United States Capitol building, just like Donald Trump did, then yes, hold him just as accountable as I'm advocating for holding Donald Trump. If he was just at the protest, shooting live feed on his cell phone and posting to Twitter and Instagram saying, hey, I'm here with all the Donald Trump Republican conservatives and, it's so great and it's awesome, and then stayed out of the violence and didn't tell anybody to march on the Capitol, then no, in my opinion, he's fine. I may disagree with him on a lot of political issues and political stances, but that's certainly allowed. When you start advocating for the overthrow of the United States government and the Constitution because you didn't get an election result that you wanted, that's a very clear, bright, dividing line for me. So again, without being 100% sure on how much or how little he was involved, that's my answer. It depends on where he falls on that side of the line. I hope that answered your question, Barbara. If not, we're going to take about a 5-minute break. We'll be back right on the hour, maybe a minute afterwards. And then we're going to dive into why trying to claim this was a false flag operation from Antifa is dishonest and ludicrous. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me. So next, we're going to dive into a brief segment on a conservative YouTuber who is trying to explain the thought process behind why Antifa should be held responsible for the Capitol March. He says that in a lot more words, but that's the basic justification. And we have a quick question from chat. Earlier, you mentioned a fairness doctrine. I'm unfamiliar with it. Could you explain it? Certainly. The fairness doctrine was a rule or a law, that we had that applied to broadcast news prior to Ronald Reagan's terms in office as president. And it basically said that you cannot represent opinion as news and that you have to present both sides of the argument impartially. I think that it should be reinstated that you can't represent opinion as news because, as we just saw on Fox News broadcasting, them representing opinion as news. They haven't even seen these documents yet, but they already have opinions on it, and they're going to make damn sure you know it, but they consider themselves a news broadcast. Now, the fairness doctrine applied to broadcast news. It would not have applied to cable network news or internet news. I personally think that we should reinstate it and expand it to include all those sources, since people get their news from all those sources. I don't claim to be a news network. I don't represent myself as a news network. I show myself very clearly, even in the name of the show, the opinion and the side I'm coming from. But basically, I do not think Fox News should be able to put Tucker Carlson on Fox News and then go to court and say he's an entertainer, not a news network host. If he's an entertainer, then you need to make it very clear that he is not presenting the news. The same thing when Tucker Carlson on Fox News came out with all his Hunter Biden laptop conspiracy theory stuff. And remember that? The evidence was in the mail, and it literally got lost in the mail. He had a guy mail him emails. And then when it got lost in the mail, we need to move on. Nothing to see here. That's ridiculous. News is, hey, we got this. This is what it says. Everybody can look at it and verify it. Not rumors, not conspiracy theories. Objective, verifiable facts. Not opinions. Not what you think about it. Objective, verifiable facts. And in both cases, Lou Dobbs, as we just saw, and Tucker Carlson, as I just mentioned, were giving you their opinion on things they had not even seen yet. That's not news, and it shouldn't be able to represent itself as news. So, let's dive into TimCast, the YouTuber. And this was sent to me, so if this is not your cup of tea, I apologize. However, it will give you a good idea of what those on the right are trying to justify or use to justify it was a false flag operation. It wasn't really Trump supporters. It was Antifa trying to make Trump supporters look bad, and they're the ones who looted the United States Capitol and stormed it. Without further ado,
This guy's not black.
oh, That's coming across bad. Give me just a second on the audio. Let's try just one channel. Sorry, folks. Live show.
This guy's not.
That's still not doing it.
How did CNN cover domestic terrorism on Capitol Hill? Why, they put one of these domestic terrorists on TV, acting as though the individual was a documentarian and filmmaker, and allowed them to espouse their views, which of course was all lies. Because now we know that this guy, John Earl Sullivan, a Black Lives Matter activist and organizer who was on the ground, he's been indicted. I believe he's been arrested. He has been arrested. And according to the affidavit from the FBI, he was cheering things on. He was yelling, "We did it, it's ours." He's seen in other videos calling for burning it down, burning things down. You know, we're going to burn this down. He started a group called Insurgents USA. So you mean to tell me that CNN did zero vetting of this guy? Yes. Remarkable. Meanwhile, Richie McInnes, a reporter for the Daily Caller, was defamed by the New York Times as a rioter, and he's a credentialed reporter. That's the name of the game, baby. You work for an outlet like the Daily Caller, they don't care. They won't fact check. They don't do any work. How did this guy, who is on video in Provo, Utah, yelling about burning it down, how did he get past CNN? Well, could it be that CNN just doesn't care and they want to prop up these people? What did Don Lemon say? Don Lemon said, if you voted for Trump, then you're on the side of the Klan and the Nazis. So this guy who didn't vote for Trump, it's fine what he did, right? No, of course not.
Okay, so let's go into a few of those claims right there that we can look at. CNN put on a Black Lives Matter / Antifa protester, interviewed him, and let him say his views on national television. Okay, CNN has also interviewed Trump supporters and let them say their piece. Plenty of news media were interviewing people. Why are you at this rally? Why are you here? Do you believe election fraud happened? Why are you doing this? So it's unfair for CNN to find a Black Lives Matter / Antifa protester and get his opinion on why he was in the Capitol and what he was doing there. Seems pretty fair to me. If you take out all the spooky leftist stuff, it seems like a news agency doing its job. Hey, this guy was there. Let's see what he has to say. Let's see what he says he saw. Let's see why he says he was there. And they've already done it for the other side. So why wouldn't you do it for this guy? If they didn't do it for this guy, would you be claiming that they're covering it up and trying to pretend like nobody on the left was there? Fair guess. How many of his views did he actually get to espouse? And when he said he wants to burn it down in Utah, was he referring to the U.S. Capitol? Because that's the implication you're trying to give. But I noticed you were very careful about not saying burn down the Capitol. Burn it down. Maybe he was referring to the system. Maybe he was referring to a gas station. Maybe he was referring to the Capitol. Maybe he was referring to a barbecue pit. I have no idea. You're leaving me to jump to my own conclusions, and I don't think that is accidental.
How did CNN cover domestic terrorism on Capitol Hill? Why they put one of these domestic terrorists on TV acting. The Daily Mail reports a left-wing activist who told CNN he went inside the Capitol building during last Wednesday's siege merely to document the chaos has now been arrested by police. According to the Department of Justice, John is not simply a passive observer inside the Capitol after video emerged purportedly showing him encouraging the rioters. Black Lives Matter protester Sullivan, who's based in Utah, was charged Thursday with 1 count of knowingly entering a restricted building, 1 count of violent entry and disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds, and 1 count of interfering with law enforcement. According to a release by the DOJ, Sullivan, wearing a ballistics vest and gas mask, entered the U.S. Capitol through a window that had been broken out, pushing past U.S. Capitol Police on one side. He filmed multiple videos of the event before posting them to YouTube under his username JadenX. In one of the clips, he is seemingly heard encouraging other rioters as they enter the building. In fact, according to the affidavit, he's telling the officers to stand down because they've effectively lost. He's like, it's over. You can't stop them. You'll get hurt. Stand down. Stand down.
Okay. He committed some crimes. Arrest him. Try him. Convict him. Let him serve his sentence. Along with everybody else that was there. That doesn't make it some CNN leftist plot to push a leftist agenda. I'm pretty sure I can find news agencies that have interviewed Charles Manson. That doesn't mean they're pushing some secret helter-skelter race war coming now plot. That's just ridiculous. None of this is proving that the national media is out to hide the fact that this guy committed some crimes or pushing his agenda. So how did he get past CNN?
However, Sullivan painted a far different picture of his time inside the Capitol when he spoke with Anderson Cooper on CNN. He appeared in the cable news network alongside a documentary filmmaker, with the pair portrayed as passively watching the chaos unfold.
Oh, so CNN didn't know. Maybe they should have investigated deeper, but that's hardly the same thing as pushing a leftist plot. They let the guy get on TV because he was there, just like they let the Trump supporters get on TV because they were there, and said, hey, what did you see? What did you do? Why were you there? And then later, the FBI said, hey, that guy was there, and started investigating him. Or another news agency said, hey, this guy was there, and started investigating him. Found a bunch of illegal stuff he'd done, and now the FBI is charging him with it. I don't see a problem here. How is this proving that Antifa stormed the Capitol? And that's what this was sent to me as proof as. This was sent to the channel as proof that this was a false flag operation and that it wasn't really Trump supporters, it was Antifa that stormed the Capitol. I promise we're getting there.
If you watch nothing but the mainstream media or CNN, they will be literally putting domestic terrorists in your face to espouse psychotic ideology and lie to you. That's what they're doing because they live in the exact same bubble. Now, the problem is because of the traditional power held by these institutions, other corporations are terrified of them and just fall in line with far left fringe terror ideologies and extremism. Think about this now. If you're a far leftist domestic terrorist who stormed the Capitol, CNN will give you space. They won't bother looking into your background. Why? Because you're on the left. Seriously?
Seriously? This guy has no concept of what the far left is. We don't have a far left in this country. in terms of political parties. I don't see a leftist party in this country that's advocating to nationalize all the news media. You know, all these for-profit corporations that TimCast here apparently thinks are pushing this far-left ideology to nationalize themselves, to make them no longer be corporations. And again, they've had countless people who were at the rally, including Trump supporters, on asking them why they went there and what they were doing. Hell, they ran Rudy Giuliani's trial by combat speech. They ran Donald Trump's baseless election lies over and over and over again. They might have sat there and told you why they were wrong. And if this guy said, hey, I wanted to burn down the Capitol, they might have told him why he was wrong. But I still don't get what the outrage is about at this point. And I certainly don't see how any of this proves that Antifa was secretly masterminding this whole thing. But this guy's really angry because CNN interviewed a guy. That's what this boils down to. A guy lied to CNN about what he actually did in the Capitol, and they interviewed him. This guy could have probably told CNN the truth about what he did when he was in the Capitol, and they still would have interviewed him. Because again, news media has interviewed Charles Manson. That does not mean that they are advocating his views.
Now, there's a funny meme going around of Kevin Sorbo. You may know him as he played Hercules. And he's got a series of tweets. And the meme is, it's the clown meme where the guy's dressing up like a clown. And the first one is he says, it's happening. The next one is, history is being made. The next one is, behave, don't be like Antifa, be respectful. And then the last one is, Antifa dressed like Trump supporters to storm the Capitol and frame Trump supporters. And on the left, they're all laughing about how stupid Kevin Sorbo is, so dumb. Oh my, how did he believe? Oh, wait a minute. This guy, John Earl Sullivan, did. Well, there's at least some photos showing him wearing a Trump hat. And, yes.
So the Hercules Kevin Sorbo thing is literally watching a huge Trump supporter in real time go from hallelujah, they're storming the Capitol, I wish I was there with you, to holy shit, it's not working, y'all don't do it this way, to it was actually the people I disagree with. Now notice, and remember, this is all one clip, 22 minutes of Mr. Tim here just speaking that quickly and running all this past you. Okay. Notice, well, we found one. Well, actually, he was just wearing a Trump supporter hat. You know, if I was a Black Lives Matter Antifa protester, or hell, even if I was a true blue Trump supporter, if I was a black man in the middle of a 97% white crowd, 95% white crowd, that includes Proud Boys and neo-Nazis and KKK, hell, even if I was just there to document it, I might wear a MAGA hat too, just to make sure that all those people knew that I was on their side and not a threat. And if you think that's crazy, there's plenty of videos of Trump supporters in that crowd harassing journalists, people who actually have press credentials, breaking cameras, destroying news equipment. So I think that's a pretty reasonable precaution to take. But again, that doesn't prove that Antifa committed this whole thing. It's not even anywhere close. You've got one guy there. All right, so let's go to the 1 minute of truth so far, and Mr. TimCast, 22 minutes. Here we go.
But let me be real. It's one guy. One guy so far. Maybe a couple others. There's apparently one younger guy. Well, I shouldn't say younger, but he's like in his 30s. And he's the son of a Brooklyn judge. Look, if you come to me and you tell me there were no leftists there, I'm not going to believe you. I'm sorry. I'm not going to come out and say it's true, Antifa stormed the gates and it's their fault. No, because we know for a fact it was Trump supporters. And it's seemingly most of them. But if you're going to pretend that Antifa types, leftists, did not take advantage of this because they want much of the same thing when it comes to targeting the Capitol building, you're going to be wrong, man. You're just wrong.
But let's be real here. Let's be honest. It was one guy, maybe two, that weren't on our team, bro. But if you're going to come out and say that you know with absolute certainty that there wasn't a single guy that wasn't a Trump supporter in that crowd, well, I just can't believe you, bro. I just can't believe you, dog. Who the hell has said that? Who has said that there was not a single, not one, non-Trump fan in that crowd? Hell, the Q shaman guy, the guy with the bullhorns, he's so nuts, who the hell knows what he's a fan of? That might change day to day and depending on what drug he's on at that moment. But finding that one guy or two guys, hell, I'll give you 7, 8, 10, doesn't change the fact that hundreds to thousands of people who showed up to Donald Trump's rally in support of Donald Trump trying to change the results of the election because he lost, marched down to the Capitol at the request of Donald Trump with the understanding that he would be going with them, and chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," because he wouldn't overturn an election that they lost. Mr. TimCast there admits as much in his minute and a half of truth, buried in a 22-minute long video. And then wants to pretend that people are saying that there was not one non-Trump supporter in that crowd. As if finding one non-Trump supporter inside of hundreds to thousands of Trump supporters somehow proves that the progressive left and Democrats organized all of this to make President Trump and Trump supporters look bad. As if one nut job who descended into violence, who claims to be progressive left, makes this a both sides are equal thing. because that's all they're trying to do. Well, see, this one nut on the left, he went into the Capitol too. So that's the same as the president telling all of his supporters, all hundreds, thousands, millions of them, to go overturn the election. They're equal. Can't you see that? Can't you be honest? It's not even an equal number of people, much less an equal number of responsibility. Jesus. And then the kicker, the best part, the most damning thing. Out of the whole 22 and a half minutes of this that I had to suffer through, you're welcome for clipping it, and sorry if I still showed you too much. About 30 seconds in here. What's the difference?
This guy's a leftist. He's a Black Lives Matter activist, but many left-wing organizations view him as a provocateur and just an instigator. And they booted him out of their group saying he's fake. They don't believe him. They don't believe he's a real activist. The left disavows the guy.
What? Could you say that again for me? A bunch of leftist organizations and the left as a whole disavows this guy? The same thing that we asked President Trump to do about the Proud Boys and white supremacists and white supremacy organizations that the President of the United States and the head of the Republican Party could not do? But somehow both sides are equal? Only one side in this has stormed and looted the United States Capitol building to overturn an election they did not like. Only one side in this has had a leader of their party and a president of the United States who was incapable of denouncing and disavowing white supremacy, white supremacist organizations, and the Proud Boys in a national televised debate. The same president who has retweeted a supporter saying white power. The same president who called people who attended a rally organized and hosted by neo-Nazis and KKK very fine people. Why can the left, before any of this went down, mind you, disavow our guy that goes violent, but President Trump and the Republican Party can't disavow their guys that go violent? Now, we're going to watch about minute and a half of the actual interview from CNN that Mr. TimCast here is so outraged about. Because I just want to see, because I watched this because it was sent to me before I ever watched the Anderson Cooper interview with Mr. Sullivan. Maybe they were right. Maybe he's got a reason to be upset. Maybe Anderson Cooper asked Mr. Sullivan, hey, how do you think the American political system should look? Why do you think we should burn down the Capitol? Why do you think you, me, and CNN should all go burn down the Capitol? Maybe that's what actually happened. Let's see.
All right, I'm starting my interview. You ready?
Two people who were there join us now, documentary filmmaker Jade Sacker and left-wing activist John Sullivan. John, you filmed this moment on your phone. Just can you describe what happened?
Yeah, so basically all the protesters kind of stormed to get into the chamber. We tried to get into the main entrance right when you walk down the hallway. But that being said, nobody was able to get in because there's 2 guards refusing to move. People there were not really wanting to hurt the police, so like they went down a different alleyway. They went to like the left of the main entrance of the chambers, and then took a right down the hallway that entered into that glass window scene that you see. There were about like 4 or 5 police officers right at the forefront, and I remember just coming up and seeing one of them like crying, saying they want to go home to their kids, and like
one of the police officers.
We're just yeah, one of the police officers. It was kind of like a scene out of all he sees is like thousands of these protesters like kind of converge on them, yelling, saying, "Let us in here, let us in here. We're not trying to hurt you." I ended up like talking to a few of them. I said, "Hey, we can like just make a path for you to get through. By no means am I there on the Trump side or the MAGA side, but I don't want to like see people get hurt unnecessarily, especially when like there should be a better way to go about it." So I allowed and told everybody to just let them through. They're willing to go peacefully and just put down their arms and through.
So how was this lady shot? I mean, she was trying to get through the door, and was it? Did you see who shot her?
So hey, this documentarian and this left-wing activist were both there. So we identify him straight away, who he is, what he did. And then, what did you see? How is that espousing his political views? What am I missing here, Mr. TimCast? Be honest. And you want to know how I know y'all all on the conservative Trump side? Again, not talking to the rational conservatives. You know how I know you're all being dishonest? Because nobody on the left, nobody, tried to justify any looting during the Black Lives Matter protest, the 3% of them, mind you, that turned into some kind of violence, by saying, oh, but the right did it first. The right killed people at the Unite the Right rally in 2017. Timothy McVeigh bombed a federal building in Oklahoma City. So that makes some looting and some rioting okay. Nobody tried to use that argument to justify any looting, any arson, any violence at Black Lives Matter protest. And if they had, you'd be calling it out as bullshit, because it is. And that's exactly why I'm calling out your bullshit today, because it is. I don't have a party. I have policies. I don't have a party. I have morals. I have ethics. I have a duty and an obligation to do what I feel is best for this country. And I'm going to support the candidate or the party that is closest to that. Not because they have a D in front of their name and not because they have an R in front of their name. If the Republican Party would quit running these QAnon nuts, quit electing congresswomen who, when the Capitol is under siege, are tweeting out the location of Nancy Pelosi, If you quit running them and instead run somebody like Theodore Roosevelt again, somebody who is in favor of the environment, somebody who is in favor of giving the average working man a fair deal, somebody who's in favor of getting corporate money out of politics. You turn into that party again? Hey, you're closer to my policies. You're closer to my ethical standards. You're closer to my morals. And I'll switch in a heartbeat. Because that's how this country gets better. Not by blindly voting for Republicans who are committing insurrection and treason. Not by blindly excusing calls for trial by combat and marching on the United States Capitol based on lies because they have an R next to their name. This isn't sports. You shouldn't be a fan of Republicans and you shouldn't be a fan of Democrats. You shouldn't be a fanatic. Clean up your house. Make the country better. Because I'm not compromising on democracy. And I'm not going to legislate on myth and lies and fantasies. And I don't care how triggered you get over an interview with a guy you don't like, Mr. Tim. And I don't care what your outrageous reaction is to a bunch of unclassified papers you haven't even seen yet, Mr. Dobbs. Here in the real world, where we're actually worried about making this country better for everyone, evidence matters. Reality matters. And to the rational conservatives out there, the reasonable ones, the ones that can engage with reality and don't form their opinions before they even get to read the evidence that they want so desperately to confirm their own belief, to the ones who wait to actually see what reality is before deciding how it should be, clean up your house. Get rid of these people. They're making you look like fools. I don't care how useful they are to you. I don't care if it costs you some elections. And it probably is going to. But if you don't get rid of them, if you don't hold them accountable, if you don't bring your party back to reality, we were this close to overturning an election. It's not going to matter whether or not you lose some elections going forward if the elections don't matter anymore. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I will see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend. And hopefully, we have a safe inauguration. And hopefully, all this extra security that we have put out all over the country, both in Washington, D.C. and at least 19 states that I know of, hopefully, it makes these idiots realize that it's time to back down.